Among gamers, Nintendo has always been known to be a company that goes its own way. The longtime Japanese game publisher, developer, and console manufacturer has a legacy of creating amazing games since the inception of the medium too. But especially lately, they've done some weird stuff. Today we're here to ask the question, why does Nintendo have such weird controls? In recent Nintendo history, from the Wiimote to the Wii U tablet to the Nintendo Switch, every new device takes a radical new approach to controls. This is all to say nothing of Nintendo's pioneering of two-screen portable gaming with the DS and 3DS. In short, Nintendo always thinks outside the box when they launch a new product. We're here to take a look at why Nintendo has been constantly reinventing the wheel and building often strange, often amazing ways to control games. Plus, we'll also take a look at Nintendo's place in the larger gaming industry and speculate what the future might hold. So, let's get into it. What's so weird about Nintendo controls, you ask? It goes way back, but we're thinking about modern Nintendo. Starting about 20 years or so ago, when the DS first launched in 2004. Gaming with two screens was a foreign concept to gamers. Having two PC monitors wasn't even commonplace. Still, Nintendo saw the amount of information and complexity that would be communicated with two screens and went all in. They did the same with the Wii a year later. Motion controls had never worked. The PS2's iToy curiosity was a testament to that. But Nintendo saw the overwhelming distaste for what it was, more of a reflection on how bad motion controls were and not on the idea itself. So Nintendo built a motion controller that felt good to use, and they sold over 100 million consoles because of it. Nintendo's follow-ups to both the DS and the Wii, the 3DS and the Wii U, were direct continuations of their predecessors. The 3DS sought to further maximize its two-screen system by introducing another dimension to one of the screens, immersing the player with the top screen and providing ample information and interactivity on the bottom screen. The Wii U combined the enormous success of the DS's two-screen line and the motion controls of the Wii. Sure, neither the 3D effect of the 3DS nor the tablet controller of the Wii U were all that well received, but they gave birth to the Switch. The Switch took the portability of the DS/3DS, spiced it up with some Wii-inspired motion controls and haptic feedback, and packed it in a Wii U tablet form factor. The idea for a console that can switch traces even further back at Nintendo. With much having been said about Nintendo's canceled attempts at designing a portable GameCube console in the 2000s. Gamers hadn't played on something like the DS or the Wii or the Switch before, so by definition their control schemes were out there. They were weird. They are weird when you consider how little controls change outside of the world of Nintendo. But once gamers got their hands on these devices, in the words of the illustrious Todd Howard, it just worked. Nintendo embodies the Steve Jobs-ism of customers not knowing what they want until somebody tells them. And while sometimes these customers don't like what Nintendo has to say, most of the time they do. We know Nintendo is weird, and we know that does tend to usually, if not always, work out. But why bother reinventing the wheel every time? Why not settle on a general design for a console or controller, stick with that, and iterate on it over time? Research and development budgets would be far leaner, and there would be much less risk than bringing a totally new product to market. Plus, then you can innovate vertically, improve your tech, and make more complicated and immersive games. The answer is simple economics and common sense, folks. Why compete with other console manufacturers when you can have a monopoly all your own? Nintendo has been in the game a long time, and they've competed with just about every other console out there. What's always proven successful for them is building an experience you can find on no other platform. On the other hand, you have to consider Nintendo's games. In comparison to multi-platform titles and games exclusive to PC or other consoles, Nintendo titles generally are tighter in scope, less complicated in visual complexity and detail, and often have a more lighthearted tone. This isn't to say Nintendo games are simple or for kids, far from it, but they do have common aesthetic and design choices other classes of games don't. Nintendo builds games around a core gimmick and focuses the experience around that, usually leveraging something novel about the platform the game is on. This is all part of Nintendo's appeal. But if Nintendo were to, say, build a GameCube-like console in the vein of a PlayStation or Xbox and simply improve upon its tech every few years, the charm of Nintendo games would wane without the exciting new ways to play that usually accompany them. All of this makes the obvious choice for Nintendo to be innovation. Innovation itself comes with a kind of safety net, too. Even with failure, when Nintendo tries something, most gamers at least can respect what they're trying to do, even if they can't justify buying the product. In short, Nintendo has turned constant change into something sustainable. And today, that's why among many, there's an expectation that the next major Nintendo product be unlike anything that's come before it. But, of course, this isn't the only way to do business in the games industry. Other major players like Microsoft and Sony managed to do something completely different and rake in profit just as well as Nintendo. All of this begs the question, why does Nintendo have to operate so differently? The most important thing we have to keep in mind is the business end of these three major players: Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. Both Microsoft and Sony have a long history in tech that predates their entry into the gaming and console markets. Sure, Nintendo was a greeting card company before it made the transition to video games, but Microsoft and Sony have other major businesses that can subsidize their gaming arms and even work in tandem with them. In short, they've got other irons in the fire, and Nintendo does not. Think about the numbers. In 2020, Sony had an operating revenue of over 8 trillion yen. Microsoft had an operating revenue of over $143 billion. Nintendo, on the other hand, had an operating revenue of over 1 trillion yen. These other companies are many times larger than Nintendo, so it wouldn't make sense for Nintendo to enter into a technological arms race with them. Microsoft and Sony will always have the budgets to develop and produce powerful, cutting-edge devices, while for Nintendo, this would be a much bigger risk and challenge. Both Microsoft and Sony only entered the console markets in order to leverage new, powerful technology of the time, too. For Sony, the PlayStation, which was originally going to be a disk drive collaboration with Nintendo, was their way to introduce optical discs and 3D games to the consumer market. For Microsoft, the Xbox was their way to build a bigger, better, more powerful console than the PS2. Nintendo has never in their history set out to build the most technically capable and impressive device out there. And even as technology has become exponentially more powerful and complicated, Nintendo's core philosophy has not changed. This obsession with technology is even reflected in the games of both Sony and Microsoft. Sony has built a reputation on making narrative-driven, often cinematic games. Microsoft is known for big-budget action. These kinds of experiences require lots of processing power by definition. However, the idea of competition in the games market is changing, as both Microsoft and Sony are beginning to look at platforms like PC not as competition, but instead as just a product that serves another niche. Looking forward to the future, it seems pretty safe to expect the status quo won't stay the same for much longer. So what can we expect not just from Sony and Microsoft with their already announced next-gen plans, but what can we expect from Nintendo? It's impossible to talk about Nintendo's future without first confronting the enormous success of the Switch. In 3 years, the Switch has sold 60 million units, and in places like Japan, it reigns king. The Switch has been and continues to fly off the shelves so much that millions of gamers are clamoring for more Switches. People love the idea of playing fully featured games either at home or on the go, and the most requested features are largely technical. A better CPU, a better GPU, more reliable Joy-Cons, a better screen, that kind of thing. Considering Nintendo's slow shuttering of the 3DS line, it seems reasonable to imagine there will at least be a successor to the Switch. Though whether Nintendo turns the Switch into their handheld line and eventually launches a new home console product alongside it remains to be seen. And duly considering the Switch's success, a true successor to the Switch probably isn't coming anytime soon. But when we forecast 5 or 10 years, where can we expect Nintendo to be? Will there be another wholly novel Nintendo console? It's entirely possible, but there will be an inevitable end to the great new ideas for controlling games Nintendo can sell to the masses. Many times before in Nintendo's history have analysts and pundits alike predicted that the company will go multi-platform. However, in light of both Sony and Microsoft putting their once exclusive games on PC, there is a shift in the industry where certain platforms aren't thought of as direct competitors to other platforms anymore. This trend in time seems like it will catch up with Nintendo too. While Nintendo hasn't had any PC releases, they have had mobile releases. Games like Pokemon Go or Animal Crossing or Mario on mobile are proven successes and proof of Nintendo's willingness to put their IPs on platforms they don't consider direct competition to them. It may sound a little too good to be true to think that actual ports of games like Breath of the Wild 2 may one day come to PC, but the same was said for a game like Horizon Zero Dawn when it came out. The same has been said for the long-rumored Bloodborne PC port. If history has shown us anything, it's that something's only impossible right up until the moment that it's not. After all, we are talking about businesses here. Whatever the philosophy of a company may be, executives can't run their business in direct opposition to overwhelming consumer demand forever. And nor would they want to miss out on big money. What's your take on Nintendo? Why do you think they've been doing what they're doing? And what do you think the future holds? Be sure to let us know in the comments down below. And don't forget to subscribe to us here at TheGamer if you liked the video, and ring the notification bell to stay up to date with all our latest videos. Thanks for watching!